I'd like to welcome you to the Thrive NRV Food Access Network data presentation. This conversation was originally had on the 18th of September. However, this is a quick overview in case you missed it. So why are we studying the NRV Food Access Network? First, it's to help you understand the regional landscape of hunger relief and food access. It's to help you determine common priorities, challenges, and opportunities for increasing regional impact. And it's to help provide a framework for community questions. Here's a brief overview of the study. So what was the purpose of this study? It was to determine what the landscape of food access in the NRV looks like now, and to determine which relationships already exist between organizations. We wanted to find where the greatest potential for partnerships lay and which relationships did not exist but could be important to the ongoing efforts of the network. In the survey, we had 110 respondents representing 75 organizations for an 81% response rate. This response rate may seem high, but in network analysis, a high response rate is critical. Organizations that do not respond, their relationships are left out of the network study, making it difficult to get a clear picture of what the network looks like. That's why we bugged many people to fill out the survey. In addition, some of the questions that we looked at were about Thrive meetings, organizational relationships and key actors within the network, organizational challenges and network priorities, and there were questions geared towards Feeding America Southwest Virginia at their request. So things to consider when looking at these survey results. First of all, this survey and the data presented here had to be bound in some way. Specifically, we did that by only including organizations within the NRV that specifically looked at food access. Please keep that artificial boundary in mind when interpreting the results. Clearly, we know that organizations work with other organizations outside of the NRV, and that some organizations are multitasking and not just doing food access. However, we had to put some sort of boundary in place to study the network itself. In addition, remember that this is a snapshot of one point in time and that networks are dynamic. So what's true today in the survey results may not be true tomorrow. The point in time that we looked at, the survey was open from December 2017 to April 2018. In addition, because we're asking humans to fill out the survey, there will be variation in respondent perspectives. Even with definitions provided, respondents vary in how they categorize the nature of ties and their intensity, and these differences in perception influence the results. So results should not be taken as confirmation, but as a tool that provides information for interpretation and discussion. The Thrive meetings. Here's a list of the previous community conversations that occurred. In them, you addressed barriers and challenges, software and defined needs, volunteers and community, available resources, analysis and mapping, and priority and direction. When asked about these food access meetings, all respondents stated that collective action was important for improving food access in the NRV, with 60% answering that it was most important. 32% of respondents did not attend any of the community conversations. And of those who did not attend, most stated it was because they were unaware of the meetings. Of those who attended, 80% found them to be at least moderately or very valuable. Learning about other NRV programs, developing new or strengthening existing relationships, and enhanced communications were the main takeaways that respondents gathered from the meetings. In the survey, we asked about external impediments to collaboration. External impediments are defined as the reasons outside of an organization that make collaboration difficult. Insufficient resources and geographical distance were cited as the two most pressing external impediments. Internally, organizations said that their main impediment to collaboration was the fact that this collaboration diverted time and energy away from other tasks. Network priorities and program challenges. Survey respondents were given 4 priorities to rank in order of importance. Priority 1, which was community outreach, education, and technical assistance, clearly had the most energy, while priority 4, expanding access to bulk food purchasing, clearly had the least. Priority 2, implementing a food hub, and priority 3, defining goals and structure for the NRV food access network, were fairly equally divided in terms of people's willingness to devote energy to these priorities. In addition, the top 5 action items related to these priorities were creating a list of existing resources for clients, creating a list of educational resources, identifying networks' needs and priorities, identifying ways to make distribution improvements, and providing a list of resources for providers. Shown here is a network plot. As you can see, outreach and education, the square in the middle, the large square in the middle, is the most centrally located and has the most energy. It's because it's the largest. Implementing a food hub and defining a network structure are less centrally located and have split energy. Bulk food purchasing has the least amount of energy and is the least centrally located to the network. When looking at the top 10 program challenges, most dealt with donations, transportations, and clients. Here you can see that donations and clients are centrally located. However, transportation is seen as a large issue, but is not centrally located in the network. So conclusions for this section. The main external impediments to collaboration were insufficient resources and geographic distance, while the main internal impediment was the diversion of time and resources from other activities. Priority 1 received the most energy and had the most action items attached to it. This was increasing opportunities for community outreach, education, and technical assistance. Priority 2 and priority 3, which were implementing a food hub and further defining the goals and structure for the NRV food access network, had similar energy, and priority 4 was clearly the least energy attached to it. The top program challenges were donations, client-based, and transportation. This next slide provides some of the questions that will be discussed at the next Thrive meeting on September 26th from 9 to 11 p.m. or a.m. Sorry, excuse me. Now we're moving on to the network analysis, which is an examination of relationships among organizations addressing food access and security in the NRV. This first plot looks like spaghetti, but what it is actually is a definition of all the relationships, or a visualization of all of the relationships between organizations within the network. So anytime one organization said it was connected to another organization, there's a line between them. You can see, if you look closely, there are arrows on these lines indicating the directionality of the relationship. So for example, Pulaski Church of God says it has a relationship with Jordan's backpack. The legend is color-coded. The nodes are color-coded by location. In this plot, the density is 9%. This is a low density. However, what the density means is it's the proportion of all possible ties that could be actually present. There is no magic number for density, and you do not want 100%. 100% would mean an inefficient and ineffective network because of the redundancy of relationships. But density should be considered in regards to the nature of the tie. And it should be used for comparison purposes across types of ties. So an unconfirmed relationship, which is what we showed on the last slide, is when organization A says it has a relationship with organization B. A confirmed relationship is one in which both organizations have reported a relationship with one another. So the second diagram shows organization A has a relationship with organization B, and organization B has stated that it has a relationship with organization A. In this case, we remove the arrows to reduce the noise. All of the future plots that we will be looking at are only confirmed relationships. Now, the important thing to remember is that confirmation reduces density. Usually by about 50%, density is reduced. So not all of the ties you report will be here, and that doesn't mean they're not important or that they shouldn't be included, but that they were not confirmed, and so we're not focusing on them for this presentation. The reason that we look at confirmed ties is that our intention here is to get a more reliable sense of what ties we can count as existing and lasting. If both organizations recognize this tie, it's more likely that this is an existing and lasting tie. If an important tie for your organization is not confirmed, this may be something that your organization should consider. So as you can see, we took the last plot and only did confirmed relationships here, which meant that both organizations recognized a relationship. And it did reduce the density by a little over 50% to 3.9%. Again, in the legend, you can see that the nodes are color-coded by location and that there is a low density. Only about 9% of all possible ties are present here. Again, remember that there is no magic, 3.9%. Remember again that there is no magic number for density. So types of relationships or ties. A tie is a specific type of relationship between two organizations. For this survey, examples were information sharing, food exchange, client referral, shared resources, and program coordination. In addition, they are confirmed when both organizations indicate the same tie. So why ties and not relationships? Ties are usually more meaningful and further define the data that we're trying to get at. I can have a relationship as a human being with my mother in a variety of different ways. She's my family member. She's my friend. These different types of ties, friend, family, further define the relationship than just saying I have a relationship with someone. So that's why we do ties. So in this plot, you will see that we have any tie confirmed where both organizations recognize the same type of tie. The density here is 3.8%, so it didn't go down very much, which means that people generally recognize the same type of tie with one another. Sometimes there's confusion in what you define as information sharing and what I define as sharing resources. But in the case of this plot, that didn't really happen. There wasn't much confusion, so that's a good thing. So here you can see anytime both organizations recognized the same type of tie. So centralization. Centralization is the idea of how reliant the network is on central nodes. 100% centralization looks like this hub and spoke model, where all information has to flow through the gray node. So if the blue node wants to talk to the yellow node, they have to pass the information through the gray node. So this can create both positives and negatives. It means that information is controlled as it is shared, but it also can lead to a bottleneck approach in that the gray node is responsible for the transmission of this information. A less centralized model here means that there are more pathways through which information can flow. This has positives and negatives. It can lead to some redundancy, but it also means that the network is less reliant on a central actor. So we look at centralization visually by the size of the node. So as you can see in this any tie confirmed plot, the Community Foundation and the Feeding America have high centralization or centrality because they are large nodes. The centralization of this network is 26%. Tie strengths and ties. So again, the types of ties that we included in this data collection were information sharing, food exchange, client referral, sharing resources, and program coordination. Complete definitions for these types of ties are located in the handout that will also be sent out with this message. In addition to the type of tie, tie strength is important. Tie strength represents the intensity of the relationship between two organizations. Specifically in this survey's case, it's either the frequency of the interaction between two organizations or the quality of the relationship. And tie strength is represented by the thickness of the line. So moving forward, we're going to show you the plot for the first type of tie, information sharing confirmed. Information sharing confirmed means that both actors indicated an information sharing relationship. In this network, the density is 3%, making information sharing the most dense of all the networks we will show in terms of ties. The centralization is 26% with 42 isolates. Isolates are organizations that did not have confirmed information sharing ties with one another. The size of the node represents the centrality of the organization. The larger the node, the more central that organization is to the network. The thickness of the line represents the intensity of the relationship. In this case, the thicker the line, the more frequent the organizations say they share information. The nodes are colored in terms of location. When it comes to information sharing, the Community Foundation, Feeding America, and Virginia Cooperative Extension play a central role in sharing information in the network. There are two major hub and spoke formations around the Community Foundation and Feeding America that are not connected. In addition, there are two clusters, one by service area, such as the fresh food cluster, and others by location, such as the Giles cluster, circled in the top of the PowerPoint. So why does this matter? Well, think of the telephone game. By having fewer paths to share information, it takes longer for it to get around the network. Increasing the number of pathways or ties for information to flow can be helpful. Currently, the flow of information is very reliant on hubs, particularly the Community Foundation and Feeding America. In addition, information sharing ties are the easiest tie to increase. It has a low cost, a low opportunity cost, even for smaller organizations. It's also an easy way to reach out to isolates and get them involved in the network. This should be the most robust of the networks, meaning it should have the most connections or ties. This is the food exchange confirmed network, meaning that both actors have indicated a food exchange tie. The density here is 1% and the centralization is 16% with 52 isolates. Again, isolates are organizations that did not have confirmed food exchange ties with one another. The size of the node, again, represents the centrality of the organization. The larger the node, the more central that organization is to the network. The thickness of the line represents the intensity of the relationship. In this case, the thicker the line, the more frequent the organizations say they exchange food. In this plot, Feeding America is clearly central to the network. Less central, but also critical to the structure of the network, are the Giles Mission and the Shawsville Food Pantry. There is also a cluster that is not connected to the rest of the network between Christ Lutheran and community housing partners. Again, you have some clustering by location with the Giles cluster and some by service provision, both with fresh food at the top and meal provision at the bottom. Feeding America, also, if you'll notice, has many frequent interactions with its partners, while many of the other organizations have infrequent interactions. This is client referral confirmed. For this plot, both actors have indicated a client referral relationship. The density is 1% and the centralization is 8% with 57 isolates. Isolates are organizations that did not have confirmed client referral ties with one another. The size of the node represents the centrality of the organization. The larger the node, the more central it is to the network. The thickness of the line represents the intensity of the relationship. In this case, the thicker the line, the more frequent the organizations say they refer clients. When it comes to client referral, there are several clusters who work together. There's a cluster around Giles, a cluster around Feeding America, a fresh food cluster, and over on the left-hand side of the screen, a regional organization cluster. This group includes United Way, Warm Hearth, MCEAP, and the New River Valley Community Service. This is an ideal cluster because it includes organizations from many different locations and with many different service provisions. This may be an example of what you would like the network to look like on a larger scale. In addition, NRCA Head Start, Beans and Rice, and Jordan's Backpack play a very important role in the structure of the network. That's because they attach these clusters, and in some cases are the only connection. In fact, NRCA Head Start is the only organization with direct confirmed connections between clusters. Also of interest is where there's a lack of connection. For example, there's a lack of clustering in Floyd, the red nodes, and Radford, the blue nodes, which means there are opportunities to build connections within localities. However, one should consider when building relationships with other organizations if they should be built on location or service provision. Sometimes one makes more sense than the other. This is sharing resources confirmed. The density here is 2%, centralization is 14%, and there are 50 isolates. Again, the size of the node represents the centrality of the organization, and the locations are represented by color. Here, we did not show the intensity of the relationships due to the fact that we asked about the quality of the relationship and wanted to keep this confidential. However, all respondents indicated at least a confirmed fair relationship with one another. When it comes to sharing resources, there are three main organizations with high centrality: Feeding America, the Community Foundation, and the Giles Mission. There are two main clusters around the Giles Mission and Feeding America. The Community Foundation, while very central, is connecting organizations that are already interconnected. There is one cluster around location, Giles, and one around service provision, the fresh food cluster. There are also some pairs of organizations that do not have confirmed relationships with the remainder of the network. So what does this mean? It means that there are opportunities to work together and share resources within the network. This slide represents program coordination confirmed. The density here is 1% and the centralization is 11%, with 57 isolates. This is the most decentralized of the networks. The size of the node, again, represents the centrality of the organization. And again, since we asked about the quality of the relationship, we're not showing the quality of the ties here. However, there were many relationships where both organizations confirmed an excellent relationship. For program coordination, there are 4 main clusters. There's a Giles cluster around location, a Feeding America cluster, a cluster around the Community Foundation, and a final cluster around fresh food. In addition, there's one partnership that is not connected to the rest of the network. Also of importance to note here is the role that an organization like Beans and Rice plays in the network. It connects 2 clusters that are not connected in any other way. Here is an overview again of what the networks look like. You can see the difference between information sharing, food exchange, and client referral. And the differences between shared resources and program coordination. This next plot measures the robustness of the relationships. Robustness is measured by the number of different types of ties there are between organizations. Here we included only those with 3 or more confirmed ties. 3 confirmed ties is in blue, 4 confirmed ties in purple, and 5 confirmed ties in red. The reason that we look at robustness is that we often find that relationships that are more robust are also more enduring. So if I work with you in one way, that's a tie. But if I work with you in multiple ways, that's collaboration. So we can see that Feeding America is highly collaborative with many organizations, but that these organizations rarely collaborate with one another, meaning there is a possibility for a bottleneck. This places a lot of pressure on the hub organization. In addition, there seem to be very robust relationships among the food service providers. The conclusions for this section. There's clustering of collaboration around different hubs, and it's often centered around support organizations. It's frequently explained by service provision, and it provides an opportunity to increase cross-cluster ties to strengthen the overall network. In addition, there are many isolates, so there are many small programs that are not connected to the network. This is partially because maintaining many ties is difficult for small programs. However, it provides the network an opportunity to increase connection to smaller programs through hubs or key connectors. And finally, there's very little clustering by location. While some counties are more interconnected, Giles, than others, there's an opportunity to strengthen connections within the counties, as well as building key connectors across counties. Here are some more questions to think about for discussion at next week's meeting. So while we know that structure is important to the network, it is not the only thing that it matters. So the survey also looks at other key actors that could and do influence the network. Here we asked about the top 10 nominations for organizations in terms of admiration, influence, and those that are critical in decision-making in the NRV. You see some organizations listed here are also very central to the network, such as the Community Foundation and Feeding America. But you also have players who have a good reputation on these 3 metrics, but are less structurally critical to the network. For example, the NRCA is highly ranked in all 3 categories, but it is not structurally central to the network. In addition, Department of Social Services is highly influential and critical, but is not very connected to the network. Finally, you'll notice that there are many organizations that are seen as influential in critical decision-making that are not admired. Conversely, many of the organizations that are admired for doing more innovative programming and are not seen as influential or critical to the network. The thing to remember here is that when moving forward with plans that the network is building and trying to accomplish new things, seeking out organizations that are either admirable, influential, or critical may help move those agenda items along. In addition to looking at specific organizations, we also wanted to look at what type of support agencies were important to organizations in the network. Churches are the support agencies that most of the members of the network are connecting with in some capacity. Less so are community groups and government agencies. Least of all are education, health, and corporate. In looking specifically at government agencies, you can see that most of the connections will occur at the local government level. However, in reality, only about 20% of the organizations in the network are actually working with local government, providing a great opportunity for collaboration. So the takeaway here is that organizational reputation, many organizations that are admired are not seen as critical or influential, and vice versa. And that many organizations are partnering with churches outside of the network, less so with other possible support organizations. That only about 20% of organizations partner with local government, and even less at the state and federal government. And that there's an opportunity to increase collaboration with health, education, and government agencies. Here are some of the questions for key actors that will be asked and discussed next week. Finally, here's the questions regarding Feeding America Southwest Virginia. 45% of respondents were Feeding America Southwest Virginia partners and stated that the benefits that they received from partnerships included partnership pickup program, low-cost food resources, the ability to purchase quality food at an excellent price, and bulk food supply. Changes they would like to see made or suggestions of things they would like to see changed were a closer location for the warehouse and possible transportation assistance, the elimination of fees and excessive paperwork, to be assured that there were certain foods there all the time. It was stated that they did not like grab bags due to spoilage and food they didn't need, and they would like more appointment options. This concludes the presentation. We hope to see you all at the next Thrive meeting on September 26th from 9 to 11.